Hello sword friends, welcome back to my YouTube channel. I'm Brittany. Today I'm going to be talking to you guys about gorgets, or gorgets. I was recently having a conversation with one of my good friends from SoCal Swords, RJ McKeon, and I was talking about gorgets. And he informed me that they might actually be not called gorgets and instead pronounced as gorget. But I cannot get over that. I refuse to believe that. So for the rest of this video, I'm going to stick with gorget for my pronunciation, and you guys can just argue about it in the comments if you really feel strongly about it. A gorget is an essential piece of equipment that we use for sword fighting. In fact, I'm pretty sure that every umbrella of sword type stuff actually uses a gorget. So not just HEMA, which is like my general area of expertise. Buhurt actually uses gorgets as well, so does the SCA, LARP, I think Lightsaber even requires gorgets. They are absolutely essential, and they are there to keep your throat safe from any unwanted thrusts, and even cuts at times too. Gorgets come in all sorts of different shapes and sizes, but the general sort of design is really similar. Right across the board, you have kind of a collar type here that is protecting the throat, specifically the trachea. You really want to protect that from any kind of like crush or impact here. Really what we're looking for is dense material, pierce resistance. Sometimes you'll see them made of leather, plate, like steel plate, or foam is really common too. So I'm just going to go through some of the different types of gorgets that I have here in my studio, and maybe it'll give you an idea of what type works best for you. I'd like to start with showing you my personal gorget. So a lot of people end up going with custom gorgets that get made to their own specifications, but there are so many different gorgets that you can buy online that you don't necessarily have to go the custom route, because this can actually be pretty expensive. My custom gorget had a lot of design features that I added for myself personally. So this is made entirely of hardened leather. So there's nothing that can get through this. It's pretty stiff. I do need to use leather conditioner, so I learned recently, to keep it in its optimal form. But some of the things that I designed for this was, there's this flap right here, and what that does is it ends up being a blade catcher. So if there is a rogue point that ends up cutting right here, if it slides up, ideally it'll catch right on this flap and it'll trap it in between as a blade catcher. The other thing that I added to this as well that some gorgets don't have is this frontal kind of chest piece here. So when I go to put it on, this sits nicely in the front. Not only does it protect my throat here, but it'll cover the very top of my chest as well. The nice thing about it too is it presented a really great medium to add a little leaf for me. As well, this is detachable. So all I have to do is unscrew the rivets here, or the screws I guess, and that'll come right off. And then if I didn't want to wear it all the time, I don't have to. It's got a nice little side buckle here, which is pretty standard. You'll see some of the other ones actually use Velcro. I prefer the buckles personally. It also has these plates down the back here, and that's just to protect the top of my spine as well. If you do go with a custom gorget, I think it's a great option because then it can actually fit your own kind of neck, but also if you are wearing a very specific type of gambeson or fencing jacket, you can design it to sit underneath really, really nicely and not be like really bulky and high profile. It can be like flush, and it'll just fit better with your kit if you go with a custom. However, like I said before, custom is very expensive. I was very fortunate. I got this one from Vargas Hides and Dyes, I believe, out of Canada, and he gave me a really great deal on it. He was really, really nice about it, took my measurements, and I think I ended up paying less than $100 Canadian for it, but that was also more years ago than I'd like to admit. So I can't really say that anybody would pay that same kind of price for custom, but there's lots of folks out there making custom gorgets. Just make sure that you meet the right specs so that it actually covers the throat here, and it does either use materials such as hardened leather or steel, something that is crush resistant but also pierce resistant. The next one I'm going to show you here So this one is originally I believe Terry Tyndall, I think. That Guy's Gorgets. So That Guy's Gorgets is no longer called That Guy's, it's now That Gal's, and it has been, his apprentice has now taken over the company, and she is doing all the work for this. And from what I can tell, same quality, nothing's really changed in any negative way, so I'm still happy to say that these are great gorgets. Basically what you have here is a two-piece collar. Buckles again, which I really like. And the way this is designed is actually, I don't want to say unique, but you won't find many on the market that are like this, where it is actually two pieces. So if I take this other buckle here, it'll come apart entirely. The cool thing about that is when it's buckled, it sort of like overlaps a little bit right on the sides. I think that actually helps like create a lot more structure, and it has like weird, or it prevents weird flexibility in it. It'll actually like help keep its shape, and it'll sit quite naturally on the neck. Taking a look at this That Guy's, or I guess now That Gal's gorget, you can see under here there is a steel, like a solid steel plate right here, and then the rest are little tiny smaller plates. Now you can't see it obviously underneath the leather, but this is leather and steel. It's been riveted here. The little plates, almost like scales, they overlap. This ends up providing a huge amount of protection. So not only does it protect right on the throat here, but it has a lot of coverage across the collarbone and the front of the chest, which is awesome, super, super handy. If I didn't have a really nice, beautiful custom leather gorget, this is probably what I would have ended up getting anyway. Everybody that owns one has nothing but wonderful things to say about it. However, they're not the easiest to come by because I'm pretty sure you can only get them as they get made. So you have to be pretty quick when they get released, you gotta snap them up. If you go the custom route or anything that has some handmade qualities, it's made of steel, leather, things like that, they're going to be a lot more expensive. Well worth the price, mind you, but if you want something a little bit more economical, you have other options such as the PBT here. I have the Red Dragon, Purple Heart. These three are actually very similar in their design. They use very similar materials and very similar shape. Now you'll notice they have very high collars. So the PBT here has a really high collar. That's awesome. What it doesn't have is a blade catcher. Again, not totally required, but sometimes it's a nice option. You don't necessarily need it though, because a lot of like spez jackets, for example, are designed with a blade catcher right in the jacket itself. But regardless, it's always a nice feature to have, and some of them have it, some of them don't. These ones do not, but they do have, like I said, a really, really thick collar, so hopefully that kind of just closes out that space there. The other thing that it has are these little wings. So it's got this front kind of chest piece, and then these cover more of the collarbone here on the side. Now, if you are really small like me, something like this is really, really uncomfortable to wear under a jacket. However, if it fits really well and you're a bigger person with a broader kind of chest to cover, it might sit better under your jacket, and it ends up being a really great option. Having that extra padding right in here is so nice. Getting stabbed there is not the most fun thing in the world. Less dangerous than in the throat. So as long as your gorget actually does its job as throat protection, everything else is like cherries on top. Looking at the Red Dragon, it's a very similar design as the PBT and the Purple Heart, but you'll notice it doesn't have the little side wings. So if that's something you're looking for, you want a little bit of that extra kind of collarbone protection, maybe go with one of the other two options. This one, really great, economical, price isn't too bad. It's got the features that we're looking for, that high collar, it's got that little chest drop, really good. Velcro in the back. I'm not such a huge fan of Velcro personally. I like the buckles, I think they're a little bit more secure. But you know, it's a preferential thing. This also helps keep the cost a little bit lower, but totally up to you. And they're actually pretty flexible, so like you can move them around quite a bit. So the nice thing about that is they'll kind of move with you a little bit under your jacket, whereas something like the steel or the leather might feel a little bit more stiff and restrictive, but again, totally preference. Taking a look here at the Purple Heart gorget that I have, this one very similar to the PBT. It's got that frontal kind of chest drop, that little piece here, it's got the little side wings, but you'll notice unlike the PBT, the wings on it the flaps here are not nearly as big, so this ends up being great because it's a little bit lower profile, takes up less space on the body. So I actually really like this one. When I put it on, it's not like flaring out towards my shoulders. So that makes it a really nice option, is it does cover, but it's not necessarily like over covering and then restricting my movement. So it's a really great option. The padding is a lot thicker, like way thicker than the PBT. So I know that this gorget itself is going to be extremely protective. I'm taking no risks. And I'm not suggesting that the PBT is risky. It's really not. It's a great gorget. But just feeling out this Purple Heart one, definitely tell there's a lot more to it. I actually think there might even be a piece of like hard plastic inside there with foam as well. So it ends up being quite comfortable. Again, Velcro. The one downside to the Velcro on this gorget, it's not even the Velcro itself, it's the elastic. This will stretch out over time, which you can kind of see. It starts to get a little bit loose, and then that'll have the gorget sitting a little bit less snug and having more gaps. So just keep an eye on that over time. Super easy to fix on your own. Maybe think about replacing that elastic strap every now and again once it does kind of lose its elasticity. The next one I'm going to show you is this Destroyer Mods gorget. Lots of folks have it. I've heard a lot of mixed reviews. I actually don't hate it. However, some of the things that I'm not a big fan of personally, it doesn't have the same sort of coverage. So it's not like the other ones where it has that little chest drop, the flaps or anything. What it does have though, it has that nice built-in blade catcher here. What I don't like, however, is this separation. I really am not a fan of that personally. Doesn't really vibe with me. I can't really put it to words. It's not what I want. However, one of the things that I really do like about this is that you can heat this up and kind of like form it a little bit better to your actual size. Because for me, this is a loaner, so I haven't done anything to adjust it. It's just a loaner in my school. But if this were my personal one, you can see if I just put it on here, it's really wide on my neck and it doesn't really close the gap. So when I actually put it on, it sort of like bows out this way. And that's really uncomfortable, and I can't quite get my spez jacket to close over it. So then what ends up happening is I just have this huge gap right in here, which is obviously not good. I would never, ever, ever advocate for a DIY gorget. However, I'm going to show you this one. Now, unlike the Destroyer Mods one that I showed you, this one is pieced on either side, like the Destroyer Mods. Then it was secured in the center, so that there's no gapping right in here, as opposed to our Destroyer Mods, which has this. So if this one was like permanently attached on the center, I probably would have been a lot more happy with it, but it wasn't, and so that's my biggest criticism of the Destroyer Mods. Alright, so now we know everything we need to know about gorgets that are available. There's a lot of different kinds on the market. These are not all of them. There's so many more. This is just sort of a little collection that I have available at my studio to give you an idea of different styles and materials and aesthetics. So you have your gorget, you're ready to go. One of the things I really want to stress to people is that the gorget needs to be underneath your jacket. There are some that are designed to be over the jacket, and that's fine, but most of the time, I don't want to make up some random number, but I'm going to anyway. 9 times out of 10, your gorget should sit underneath your spez jacket, and that blade catcher, if it does have one, should come up over the top of the collar. This prevents any sort of like slipping of the blade in between the gorget and the jacket in a way that could then expose your throat underneath. So when I'm kitting up, I always start with my gorget first. I put that on before anything for 2 reasons. 1, it should be my bottom layer that's closest to my body. 2, I really don't want to forget it. Once I've put all my kit on, I've got my mask, my jacket, everything on, I don't want to have to take it all off again just to put my gorget on, but I really don't want to put my gorget over top of my jacket, because then the only thing it's going to do is stop direct thrusts. What it's not going to do is stop anything from slipping under in between, which is really dangerous. So like I said, there's a lot of different styles of gorgets. You can actually get some that are just totally made of steel entirely, and those work really well for something like harness fectin or armored fighting. But for HEMA, this is sort of what you're looking for more or less, as long as it does its job, which is protect your throat from very heavy impact cuts and also from thrusts. Granted, our swords are designed to not really pierce anything, so some people are maybe wondering why bother? Like a sword, you're using a blunt sword, it's not going to actually pierce your skin. That's where you might be wrong. There are a few things that can happen that gorgets help protect against. So thrusts that end up sliding up in between the jacket, that'll help stop those kind of rogue thrusts. It doesn't really take a lot of force to actually damage or even crush the trachea. So we want to avoid that, obviously. The other thing that it'll help protect against is blade breaks. So sometimes what'll happen is a blade will break in the middle of a sword fight, and sometimes you know and sometimes you don't. Most of the time you do, you can hear it because it makes a fancy little ting sound and it goes flying. You'll also be able to feel it, the sword just suddenly doesn't feel right in your hands. But it can take a second to register for some folks, and the worst thing that can happen is you make contact, the blade breaks, and you start pressing your thrust with a broken blade. Ideally, you have all the protection in place to keep you safe, that if there is a blade break, you hope the blade ends up breaking really straight and not jagged, but crazy things happen. That's why we have pierce-resistant jackets. That's why you have a gorget underneath your jacket. That's why there is a bib on the mask that goes over top of those two layers. So the more protection there, the better. So please, please, please do not skimp on your gorget. Don't cheat your throat protection. Take it seriously and get something that works for you and fits you well. Thanks so much for watching, guys. I hope this was helpful and puts you on the right path for finding the right protective equipment so that you can get sword fighting.